is your first time here, of course, because we've now opened this up, it will become more of a system-wide lunch and learn activity. Next year, I think they will rotate these among all the schools, so each school will host a lunch and learn a different month. But because we started it here, we want to finish it throughout the end of this year because we have parents who've been coming here each month. So welcome again to our monthly lunch and learn. This the topic today will be how to support your child in the writing process. And the best teachers, of course, or the best presenters will be teachers. And we have two teachers here who are very effective with the writing process. We have a first grade teacher, Ms. Wheelis, and we have Ms. Carr. She's one of our early intervention program teachers here. She also helps coordinate the SST process in our school. So they are very familiar with the writing process. They have a lot of background, and they brought the background knowledge when they came to KB Sutton. So we are so glad they're here and they can share all their, all that they've learned through professional development with us on how we can improve our writing process, because that tends to be a weakness in our system, and we are trying to definitely improve the process here. And I think we've made leaps and bounds this school year with our writing, and I just appreciate their efforts so much. So I'm going to turn it over to them, put them on the spotlight a little bit, and let them share some things with you, so that way you can help your child at home with writing. Okay?
Thanks for coming, and as Ms. Elder has just introduced us, if we could just go around, if you could tell us, what grade level your students are in, so we can kind of just get a feel as we talk. There may be some specific things that we might point out to you. So I want to start over here. We can tell us who you are as well.
Okay. Tracy and David Filmer. We have a second grader and a seventh grader.
Jeanette Childs, I got one in pre-K and
Michelle Head, I have one in fourth, one in second, one in pre-K, and one across the room.
I'm Leslie Gavin, and I have a kindergartner and a third grader at Teacher's Con.
Laura Moore, I have one seventh grader, two sixth graders, a third grader, and a second grader.
Kristen Richardson, I have one first grader.
Wanda Williams, and I have a third grader.
Joanne Benz, I have he's in grade 14, an assistant principal here at KB Sutton.
So we just kind of wanted to start off talking about some of the things that we do in school, and then for us to tell you some of the things that you could do at home as well. First off, writing it really starts as early as pre-K, but the performance standards that we use start strong in kindergarten. In the back of your packet, you don't have to look at it now, you can. I've given you some I can statements for each grade level. What you can really notice is how the standards build. It's not always brand new things they're learning. It's where you have these foundational skills, and each year the foundations are building so that they are basically learning the same things, but it's growing. And those are stated in kid-friendly language, so they're I can statements. But you can kind of see, okay, if I've got a second grader, this is what I can expect that they're doing in writing in school. Of course, we have in 4th and 5th grade, or 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, our students take a writing test that is a standardized test. In 5th grade, it's really a benchmark year where the scores are sent off. It's a big deal. And we have seen over the past years that our students here at Sutton have really struggled in writing. So this year, as Ms. Elder mentioned, we've really put a lot of initiatives in place. We've put a big focus on writing, and we've seen a lot of really good things with our students in the school as far as that goes.
Okay, and I'll talk a little bit about Writer's Workshop. And Ms. Carr and I have both been trained with the Writer's Workshop method, and we have had a lot of great mentors to help us get to where we are with our knowledge with this. And one of the things that they found is first, is it's really a process, is starting off with basically an idea, and you have to give them that time to think about what they want to write about. And at some point, I guess that's going to be in one of the slides, right? At one point, we'll kind of talk to you about how to get those ideas going and how that's going to help you. But there is a process, and then we kind of start with, especially with the upper grades, they're expected to do a draft and edit that draft, and then have their final published piece. And then Ms. Carr can kind of show you, yesterday she got me doing a lesson, starts off with a mini lesson. Now, majority of my mini lessons, they're actually at the carpet with me and talking about some things, but this particular day I was doing a PowerPoint, and so I was showing them some things. But if you'll notice, the writer's workshop starts off with a mini lesson first, so it's just a quick 10 to 15 minute lesson before they go off to write of what they're expected to do in their writing. So if you notice, I was holding a book. No, that's fine, that's fine. I was holding a book, so you'll also see I use a lot of books to emulate a lot of things that I want them to be doing, just like authors do in their writing. So you'll also see in here us talking a lot about readers and books and things, because they do cross over. But this kind of gives you an example of what writing time looks like after the mini lesson. Then I send them off to write, and they have writing folders, and they work on specific skills that we talk about in our lesson, and then also continue the skills we had learned previously. And so in their folders, they have different papers that help them depending on what type of writing that they're using at the time. And so then they have that time to write, and at the end, we kind of come back together, summarize what skill we were working on. A lot of times we'll do a share where if I notice a student did that skill that we had targeted during our lesson really well, then I'll let them share their writing. Sometimes I'll let them share with a partner, and we celebrate and give high fives. You did a great job adding that in your writing. So that's kind of the structure of the writer's workshop, is our mini lesson, they go off to write, and we come back and close it up and celebrate for the day. So.
And also at different levels too, there's conferencing going on, where a teacher is meeting with a student and giving feedback to the student on their piece so that they can go back and improve their piece, and it's really a continuous process.
Because I'll pull, like sometimes I'll work one-on-one with a student, but then I'll also pull a small group of students too. If I see several students needing the same type of skill and they need help in one thing, I'll pull them in a small group. So just like what Ms. Carr was saying, is there is some conferencing going on as they're writing. I'll come over and kind of coach them through what they're doing. So, this is my part. You want me to? Okay. So these are some ways to get started at home. Mainly starting with storytelling, especially if you have a younger one that is pre-K, kindergarten age. You know, they're not writing at this point. So really you want them to do that oral storytelling, just telling you what happened. So not only just from books that they've read, telling stories, but just telling stories about moments that happen at home, things that happen, and that's later too, right, in one of those slides where, and so just mainly getting them to be able to tell you something that happened from a beginning, a middle, and an end, just oral storytelling, because before they can write it on paper, they have to have it here and here to be able to put it on their paper. So then getting it on the paper, the primary grades, especially with kindergarten, we're going to tell our story with pictures, just like what we do with books. Before they're reading words, they're telling the story using the picture. So they're going to do the same thing and draw pictures that illustrate and tell the story that they were saying verbally. And then the upper grades, of course, instead of starting with pictures, they're going to start with brainstorming, and they use a lot of ways in the classroom how they can do different kind of maps and things to get the brainstorming going and different ideas. So there's some ways to just get that oral storytelling out. Lower grades starting with just telling your story through pictures, and upper grades getting your story started by just brainstorming your ideas and what you're thinking.
And any of those things that they're having difficulty with, just model it. Tell them a story and say, you know, point out certain things, how you had a beginning, and then have them even repeat the same story, just to get them used to doing some of those things. So some of the ideas that you can do at home, of course your child can draw a picture and tell a story, as Ms. Willis mentioned before. As they're starting to become writers, they're going to start with a picture, start putting labels onto the picture. We don't expect our pre-K and the beginning of the year kindergarten students to come in writing full papers. We expect to start to see some letter matching to words. If they're drawing a cat, they're getting a C. In a few weeks, they're getting the C and the T. They're not always getting that vowel sound, but they're progressing through. You can make lists with your child. If you're going to the grocery store, instead of you writing your grocery list, have them write your grocery list. Of course, make sure that you can read it so you don't get there and you don't know what you need to pick up. But, and that can help build the sounds and build a lot of the phonetic skills as well. Copying words and sentences. A lot of times students have a hard time just with the writing. You can write, and sometimes teachers ask for homework for them to write sentences. And that is a hard thing for some students. And I feel like if you're creating the sentences together, they may not be able to get them on paper, but if you can show them how and they're copying it, they're still learning. They're learning the structure of a sentence. They're learning words. They're learning that they all have meaning. And it's all going to tie in to help them in writing. Becoming very fluent with sight words. This is something that you will hear so often in school, is that our students have to know those sight words. And in kindergarten and first grade, we really stress knowing the words. But starting in first and second grade, we want them to start spelling those frequent words that come up, because they should just know those. Those should just be so automatic. And that'll just help them in writing as they're transitioning the sentences. And they'll have those words that they're very confident with, so that then when they get to some of the harder words, they aren't so frustrated with the words that they should have already had, that they can take the time and sound out the new words. This is one, it's working on fine and gross motor skills. I was talking to Ms. Stevens, one of our kindergarten teachers, and she said, definitely bring this up, because in kindergarten she sees a lot of students who are so uncomfortable holding a pencil that they're automatically turned off from writing. So doing things to improve those motor skills, getting tweezers and having them pick up cotton balls or pick up beads, it seems so simple, but that really is refining those motor skills. And that's going to, I know it doesn't seem, you go ahead. But those motor skills are so important and so crucial in writing. And also, I know with my son a lot, I love to write. That's something I've always enjoyed. So if he's ever, if I want him to write, he doesn't want to, I'll say, okay, you go write a story and I'll write a story too. And then we'll share them together. Or we may pick the same topic or something that happens and write about the same thing and then compare our stories. So just show them that you can be a writer too, because how often do they see us with a pencil and paper writing, but yet we may expect them to do it. So we need to model what we expect as well.
And so what I was talking about earlier about coming up with ideas, one of the best things that we do is at the beginning of the year, we just talk about how to get ideas for your stories. And it doesn't, and a lot of them want to think it has to be some big event like going to Wild Adventures. And it really doesn't. And so we call some of these small moment stories, because they're the small moments that happen in our house. I tell my class I used to have a dog. And there was a time I had my purse laying on the floor and I had just had cash in it, and he grabbed a $5 bill, took off running, I'm chasing him around the house, and how just something like that made a fabulous story, and the kids loved it. And so it doesn't always have to be this big event that you do. It could be something like you dropped a plate and it broke, and how Mama told you to step back so you didn't step on the glass. Any of those little things. But ideas also come from, and we use the heart a lot because we say it's things close to our heart. It's the things that matter the most to us that gives us the best ideas, such as our family. So we can use a lot of ideas of things that we do with our family, going to grandma's house, going to our aunt's house. Things that I like to do. I like to really show students the commonalities that they have when two kids love playing soccer. And so we just talk about how you can use those soccer practices and your games as stories, favorite places that you like to go. And of course, just a happy day, just any kind of happy moments, a birthday party, or any thing that you do. Maybe you went and had a picnic in a park after church on a Sunday, those little things make the best small moment stories. And so I use this sheet in their writing folder in the classroom, so that way when they can't think of anything to write, because they're always going to be like, I can't think of anything to write, well, turn to your heart paper and look and see if there's something that gives you an idea from that. And so even at home, you can just draw a heart on a paper and have your child do the same thing at home. And I also have had for students that struggle with coming up with ideas, I've had them take a file folder home and I've put sticky notes all in it. And when something happens at home, one of those little small moment things that happen, I just tell them, write it on that sticky note, or the parents can write it on the sticky note. And then when they come to school, they can bring, or they can stick that sticky note in their agenda. And when they come to school, they take it out of their agenda and slap it into their folder. So then when it's writing time, they open it up, there's that sticky note and say, oh yeah, I remember I was gonna write about this happened yesterday. And so for those moments, sticky notes are your best friend, because sometimes you forget about all those little small moments. And so it's great to have something that kind of helps us remember, either by using the sheet or sticky notes, whatever it takes.
And you do have a copy of this sheet in your set, and Ms. Stevens uses a list. There's so many different ways to do it, but you would be amazed. This is one of the hardest things about writing for kids. We see so many I like stories. I like this, I like that, because they just, the ideas, even though we know they have experiences, because it can be, you know, something tiny that they can write a big story about, but they just don't come to them.
And this is basically, we were talking about setting expectations. And in my classroom, and I'm working on this with a lot of the first grade teachers, so a lot of these things are kind of new for what we're bringing into the school. But for my class, I do like a rubric, and you can see there's a part for a self-evaluation, partner evaluation, and then of course my evaluation. And in the rubric, it lays it all out. And at the beginning of what I'm teaching, at the beginning of a new unit, this was a how-to, when they were writing how-to type of pieces. But at the beginning, I give them, you know, a couple of days in, I give them this rubric, and I say, okay, these, at the end of the unit, these are the things that you will be expected to do in your writing. So I can choose a topic on something I can teach others about. I can use transition words. I can put my directions or steps in the correct sequence. So we go through this whole rubric and talk about, these are what I expect of you. So when you're writing at home, showing your child, you know, what's expected in the writing. You know, if they're, you know, working on punctuation, I expect to see punctuation at the end of your sentences, and so forth. But in the classroom, they have that time where they can evaluate themselves. So at the end of the unit, they pick their best piece that they think they did the best on, and they can evaluate themselves. Partner can evaluate them, and it just gives them a good knowledge for what's expected of them. So they know, and they know that ahead of time, that this is what I should be doing in my writing. And at the end, then they say, okay, I knew I was supposed to do this, so now I can prove that I did this. So at home, setting those expectations for what it is that you want them to do, instead of just sending them off and say, okay, I just want you to write, you know, say, okay, so today, you know, we're working on making sure we put capital letters at the beginning of our sentences. Or if it's a kindergartner, we want to make sure we have that beginning sound at the beginning of our words. So to kind of make it clear, instead of just asking them, okay, go write, give them something specific as they're writing. Say, this is what I'd like to see you doing today. Yes?
Did you make that up, or is that based off of a specific standard?
I did make this up, but it did come from the standards. There is a standard about writing informational pieces and being able to see. This is a first grade standard, and so I had just taken some of the things that, as first grade teachers, that we wanted to see them to be able to do in a how-to type of writing. And so, I'm working on trying to make each one of these for the units. And at the end of the unit, I'm trying to also work on making a parent letter. So then when all the writing goes home to parents, parents can see that this is what your child should, this is what you should be seeing in their writing. Because sometimes parents get a bunch of writing home, but then they don't, oh, this looks good. But, you know, you want to know what you're looking at. So I'm kind of working on that and trying to work across grade levels to start getting that going as well. So the rubrics and parent letters, so that way parents know a little bit more. But yeah, it helps when students know what's expected of them. They know they've got a specific focus.
And that's as simple as if they're writing sentences for homework. You're working with third graders. I cannot tell you how often I see sentences that don't have a capital letter or don't have punctuation. And you know, by third grade, that should be a give me. So if you're, making sure that you're seeing those things at home consistently, they're gonna come to school and they're gonna not only remember that we're telling them that all the time, but man, my mom told me that last night. I know that, and that is just gonna become so automatic. Because I think sometimes we're just in a rush. I know I'm a parent, I get that way too. Come on, we've gotta get this homework done. Let's go. And it's done, and we're done. So we don't look back over it and say, okay, what could we have done better? So it doesn't necessarily even have to be that you're sitting down and writing a story. It can just be writing in general. So one big link is reading and writing. Reading affects writing, and writing affects reading. That's just, there's been so much research done on the connection of the two of those. This is just a quote that I found that I thought was pretty powerful. Research has found that when children read extensively, they become better writers. Reading a variety of genres helps children learn text structure and language that they can transfer to their own writing. In addition, reading provides young people with prior knowledge that they can use in their stories. One of the primary reasons that we read is to learn, especially while we are still in school. A major portion of what we know comes from what text we read. Since writing is the act of transmitting knowledge to print, we must have information to share before we can write it. Therefore, reading plays a major role in writing. And I know sometimes we struggle to get our kids to read, but the more that we can encourage them to do that, they can emulate some of the things that they're seeing and also get that knowledge. So, one of my stressors to you, and this is to me being an EIP teacher, I'm always, please, summertime, break, read, even if it's the last thing they want to do. If you're reading to them, if you're reading together, just doing the act of is going to give them that extra knowledge to help them with their writing. Weekends, holidays, throughout the summer, anytime you can encourage them. Some kids you can't get them to stop reading, but some it's a chore, but I would encourage you, whatever it takes.
And even those weekends and holidays are great to write about, because then you usually have a lot of those small moments going on there. But one of the things that I also want to stress, I know at the beginning I talked about how important it is with reading and writing being a crossover. And so you'll see a lot of times, like in my writing lessons, you'll walk in and I'm holding up a book. Miss Benz at the beginning of the year said, every time I walk by your room, you're just sitting there reading a story. And actually, I do things with books, and like I'm not even reading the whole book at times. I'm showing them how an author uses things in their books that cross over to writing. So one example, and this is a wonderful book, this is Fireflies by Julie Brinklow, and it's a great small moment story that gives lots of great details. But the very beginning, one of the things, we talked about how to start off a story, and in first grade I'm teaching them how to use a lead, how to lead off in a great lead, and it says on a summer evening. You might use one stormy afternoon, just something to get the story going versus, just starting with so that's one thing. So I show them, like a lot of times I'll read a book, and then when it gets writing time, I'll come back and say, remember how Julie Brinklow started off this story in the beginning on a summer evening? So and then I might teach them about leads, and so I'll point out how this author does that and show them, well, you're an author too, because you have to think like an author does. If you're writing, you have to think just like Julie Brinklow does, and she wanted to start hers off with a great lead. You can do that too in your writing. So showing the books to your children that you've read, and when you're reading it, point out those things that say, oh, look how the author did this, or look at the word choice that author used. For example, on this page, it says, I thrust my hand in the jar and spread it open. He's catching fireflies, and then he put his hand in the jar. Well, he could have just said, I put my hand in the jar and caught the fireflies. And then we talk about, okay, well, that sounds all right. And then my students all kind of go, yeah, but that's kind of boring. So we talk about how to make it more interesting. What did this author do to make it sound really good? The jar glowed like moonlight, and I held it in my hands. I felt a tremble of joy and shouted, I can catch hundreds. And so I think to and I tell my students that when you're an author, you're also writing for other people to read your stories. and you wanna make it interesting. Have you ever had a book that you just, after a few pages, it's like, this is so boring, I just don't wanna read it anymore? Well, you want to keep your reader wanting to read and wanting to know more, so you've got to do these things. So, any of the skills that I teach, I also show them that real authors do that in their books. So at home, when you're reading, using the authors as a mentor, to just point out how they're doing things in books and say, you could do that in your writing too. Look at how they use this sound word. It said boom, crash. You could put that in your writing too. So authors as mentors is a big thing. And they even notice it when they start reading. We've taught ellipse, the ... in the story, and I can be reading and they'll shout out and go, that author used a ... they used an ellipse. And so it's really great to see them noticing those things in a book.
And these are first
So,
graders.
yeah, these are first graders, and so it's really great to see that they're making that connection that this is an author. Hey, when I write, I'm an author too, so I need to think like an author does and write like an author does.
So we're gonna give you an opportunity to make a mini office that you can take home that your child can use. Sometimes, even in the classroom, they may get to a letter sound they're having a hard time with, or a blend, or they may not have an idea, or there's a word that they use a lot. So sometimes we can provide them with something, a resource to go to. This is just a wide variety. It's got shapes and colors and directionality and months and sounds. It's a whole bunch of different things. Word endings, what I can do when I finish with the story, a checklist, it's got the heart. So we're going to let you make one of these. If you don't want to make one, that's fine. I probably have enough that if you want to make two, that there's enough to make two. And I'm so sorry, you'll have to trim some of these things, and I don't have anything bigger than kids' scissors. And it doesn't have to be in any specific order.